the flip side of success, and you alluded to that earlier when you talked about how in the early years failure was often a good teacher, is always a good teacher, but now with many eyes peering over one's shoulder and many methods and modes of scrutinizing one's behavior for federal and compliance and many other purposes, failure is not as easy to see as a positive. It's almost always seen as a negative. But I'd like you to think about whether you've had a failure that you might share with us that was a useful teacher to you that you'd be willing to, again, talk about.
Tons of them. Where do you want to start?
Well,
I think one of the things you have to put in perspective is there's a group out there called the Association of Primate Veterinarians. And when it first started, it was called the Association of Primate Veterinary Clinicians, and in order to be involved in that, you had to have responsibility for over, I can't remember, it was 300 or 400, a lot of monkeys. And what we'd have meetings once a year, and I didn't get involved, I wasn't one of the founders, but I did get involved fairly early on. And we'd get together and sit in a room and say, I just did this. Don't do that. You can hurt a lot of monkeys, because we didn't know. Yeah, I think there was an example which was, I mean, it was dramatic at the time. We had some monkeys come in which tested positive. Their blood work showed they had malaria parasites in their blood. And for the study they were going to go on, we had to clear the malaria parasites. And so we called another government agency, which shall remain anonymous, to find out what the latest therapy was for malaria, because this wasn't, I mean, the literature wasn't out there for primates. I mean, a lot of my publications were on non-human primates because there was nothing in the literature. Anything that happened we could publish. And so I figured we were going to treat these, and I was the director at the time, so there were other people actually doing the work. Who should I put in charge of this? So I had a resident who, for their previous training, should have known how to calculate dosages. So I had them calculate the dose, and then they started, and I think there were maybe 24 monkeys in that room. So they started treating. They get about halfway through, and the first one drops like a rock, and then they just start dropping like rocks. That's a veterinary expression. They were having some significant respiratory complications, so it was all hands on deck to get down there and save those monkeys, which we did. It was a long afternoon, and we didn't get home too early that night. And so I figured that somebody, you know, I was ready to kill this resident. Then we went back and refigured it, and he'd been off by a decimal point, but in our favor. Because the advice they'd given us had never been looked at in terms, it never been extrapolated from the human data to non-human primates, and so we almost, so I learned a lot from that, and one of the things we did because of that was a young woman who was in the College of Pharmacy at the time who'd wanted to be a veterinarian, couldn't because of her allergies, came to see us, and so we put her on the phone calling drug companies who had tested different drugs in monkeys as part of the bringing it to market process, and asked if they would share pharmacokinetic data with us so we could figure out our own dosage. So we created our own in-house formulary, and they were very forthcoming with her. And she did a really good job. But that one was one I was, holy smokes. But that type of thing happened pretty regular back then. You know, you didn't know. There weren't any veterinary books. I mean, there's no drug that you can pick up and say the dosage for a monkey or the dosage for this, so you had to kind of figure it out, and there weren't the Blue Book series from Lab Animal, and so our library probably, when it came to monkeys, had more human books, and it took a while to learn that monkeys, you don't use pediatric books because monkeys, you know, pediatric monkeys are pediatric monkeys and adult monkeys are adult monkeys, and so it was a real learning curve.